In the quiet seaside village of Haven's Edge, the arrival of a massive iceberg off the coast disrupted the town's tranquil rhythm. The townspeople, familiar with the occasional drift of ice from the north, were astonished by this colossal, otherworldly visitor. As the morning sun illuminated its intricate, frozen surface, a collective gasp echoed among the crowd. This iceberg wasn't just massive, it was extraordinary, and it had drifted far beyond the usual reach of such ice. Among the spectators, Michael stood apart, clutching his high-quality binoculars. A restless soul in a sleepy town, he was drawn to the iceberg's majesty, but soon spotted something unsettling. On its summit, something moved briefly, but unmistakably. His heart raced. What could possibly survive atop such a treacherous, icy expanse? Driven by curiosity, Michael resolved to investigate. He kept his discovery to himself, knowing others might dismiss his claims. Borrowing his brother-in-law's small boat and purchasing ice-climbing gear from a local shop, he prepared for his journey. The shop owner, concerned for Michael's safety, tried to dissuade him, but Michael's determination was unshakable. Michael's bold plans didn't go unnoticed. The shop owner alerted the police, who soon arrived at Michael's house. As they knocked on his door, Michael slipped out the back and darted through the narrow alleys of Haven's Edge, evading the officers. The harbor lay ahead, and with each stealthy step, he felt his resolve strengthen. Reaching the boat, Michael quickly untied it and navigated out of the harbor. Keeping close to the shoreline to avoid patrols, he slipped past the police's searchlight and steered toward the iceberg, its imposing silhouette rising against the horizon. The sea, calm at first, soon turned turbulent, testing his resolve as waves crashed against the vessel. As the iceberg loomed closer, its vastness became almost overwhelming. Michael anchored his boat and donned his climbing gear, ready to scale its icy face. The iceberg, a towering monument of ice and mystery, beckoned him to uncover its secrets, even as the biting cold and treacherous climb threatened to turn him back. The adventure of a lifetime had begun. Michael began his ascent, ice axe in hand, each step a battle against the unyielding surface. The sheer wall of ice was slippery and unpredictable, forcing him to focus intently on every movement. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and the crunch of his crampons against the ice echoed in the stillness. The climb was grueling, testing his strength and resolve, but Michael's determination burned brightly. He wasn't just climbing an iceberg, he was pursuing answers to the mystery that had captured his imagination. As he climbed higher, the view of the endless ocean below grew both awe-inspiring and daunting. The familiar world of Haven's Edge faded into the distance, replaced by the raw, untamed expanse of nature. The solitude was profound, sharpening his focus and driving him forward. Thoughts of the strange movement he had seen atop the iceberg fueled his resolve. He had to know what was up there. After hours of exhausting effort, Michael reached a ledge where he paused to catch his breath. His muscles ached, and the cold gnawed at his exposed skin, but he pressed on. The summit, cloaked in mist, remained just out of reach. He adjusted his gear and resumed the climb, navigating crevices and jagged formations with cautious precision. Finally, as he neared the peak, the mist began to clear, revealing a vast, windswept expanse of ice. At first glance, the summit seemed desolate, a barren plateau of snow and frozen ridges. Disappointment flickered in Michael's chest. Was this all there was? But then, he noticed faint footprints leading across the snow, barely visible in the wind-blown drifts. They weren't his. Someone else had been here. Michael's curiosity surged. Following the trail, he discovered a makeshift shelter tucked into a crevice. It was rudimentary but sturdy, constructed from tarpaulin and supported by ice axes. Inside, he found personal belongings, a sleeping bag, scattered tools, and a journal. The pages, filled with notes and sketches, hinted at a scientist's work. Nearby, weathered scientific equipment lay partially buried in the snow. Whoever had been here wasn't just a wanderer, they had a purpose. The realization sent a chill down Michael's spine. This iceberg was more than it seemed. Michael's discovery deepened the mystery. Among the scattered belongings, he found faded photographs of the iceberg, marked with notations in a precise hand. A worn journal detailed meticulous observations, measurements, hypotheses, and sketches of the iceberg's journey. It was clear that whoever had been here was no mere adventurer but a dedicated scientist. Nearby, a fire pit surrounded by blackened stones and neatly stacked empty cans told a tale of survival. Someone had lived here for a significant time, defying the harsh elements. But who were they? And why had they chosen this remote, icy expanse as their base? As Michael pondered these questions, a sudden blizzard descended upon the iceberg. The wind howled with ferocity, and snow swirled in blinding sheets. Michael scrambled to construct a shelter using the tarpaulin and climbing ropes. The storm was relentless, battering his crude refuge and driving icy air through every gap. Huddled inside, Michael wrapped himself in the sleeping bag he had found, fighting the cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. Every gust of wind felt like a test of his resolve. The storm raged through the night, and Michael rationed the limited food and water he had brought, melting snow for drinking water using a small stove. He clung to his determination, knowing the answers he sought were still out there, waiting to be uncovered. When the blizzard finally subsided at dawn, the iceberg was transformed into a glittering, frost-covered expanse. Emerging from his shelter, Michael resumed his search. The storm had erased most of the footprints, but the shelter's clues pointed him in the right direction. He ventured further across the summit, scanning every icy formation for signs of life. Eventually, his persistence paid off. Hidden beneath a camouflaged tarp, he discovered what appeared to be a makeshift research station. Scientific instruments, geological samples, and an old, rusted camera lay scattered around. Among the equipment were notebooks filled with detailed notes and observations, signed by Dr. Harold Jensen. The name struck Michael as familiar. Dr. Jensen had been a renowned glaciologist, once celebrated for his groundbreaking research on icebergs and climate change. But his name had faded from the public eye years ago. Why was he here, alone on this frozen giant? As Michael pieced together the clues, the story of Dr. Harold Jensen began to unfold. The journals revealed that Jensen had been studying the iceberg's unusual trajectory and composition, conducting research that he believed could offer critical insights into climate change. His notes detailed the iceberg's slow journey south, its resistance to melting, and anomalies in its structure. Jensen's work was groundbreaking, but his passion had driven him to extremes, isolating himself on this massive floating laboratory to continue his studies. The discovery of these notes filled Michael with awe and respect. Jensen's dedication was evident, but so was the desperation in his later entries. One journal described a sudden storm that had damaged his equipment and cut off his communication with the outside world. Stranded and running low on supplies, Jensen had been forced to survive in the harshest conditions, clinging to his mission even as hope of rescue waned. As Michael continued his search, he was startled by movement in the dense fog. A figure emerged, and Michael's heart raced. Standing before him was Dr. Harold Jensen himself, weathered and gaunt but very much alive. For a moment, the two men stared at each other in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. Jensen, wary at first, studied Michael with suspicion. But Michael's explanation of how his curiosity had led him to the iceberg seemed to ease the tension. Slowly, Jensen opened up, sharing his harrowing tale of survival. The storm that had left him stranded was only the beginning of his ordeal. In the months that followed, he had fought to stay alive, using his ingenuity to adapt to the unforgiving environment. As Jensen spoke, Michael listened with a mix of admiration and disbelief. The scientist's resilience was incredible, his will to continue his research undeterred by the odds. Despite everything, Jensen remained passionate about his work, determined to see it through. Their initial exchange soon turned into a shared strategy session. Both men knew that their supplies were critically low, and that the iceberg's isolation offered no guarantees of rescue. Together, they devised a plan to construct a beacon using parts from Jensen's scientific equipment and Michael's climbing gear. If the beacon's signal reached far enough, it might alert someone to their presence. As they worked side by side, an unexpected bond formed. Despite their differences, the two men were united by their determination to survive. With the beacon complete, Michael and Dr. Jensen positioned it at the highest point they could safely reach. The small device, cobbled together from broken equipment and sheer ingenuity, emitted a faint but steady signal into the vast expanse of ice and sea. It wasn't much, but it was their best hope of being found. As they waited for a response, their situation grew more precarious. Supplies dwindled to alarming levels, and the weather remained unpredictable. One evening, a severe storm swept over the iceberg, testing their fragile shelter. The wind howled with such ferocity that it threatened to rip the tarpaulin apart. Snow lashed against the flimsy structure, seeping through every crevice. Huddled together, Michael and Jensen worked desperately to secure their shelter, their fingers numb from the cold. The beacon, their lifeline to the outside world, was under constant threat from the storm. Each time the wind threatened to topple it, the two men braved the elements to stabilize it, driven by sheer determination. Every moment felt like a battle against nature's overwhelming power. When the storm finally subsided, they emerged into an eerie silence. The iceberg, blanketed in fresh snow, sparkled in the faint morning light. Exhausted but relieved, they inspected the beacon and found it miraculously intact. The device continued to send its faint signal, a stubborn cry for help in the middle of nowhere. Days passed, and the isolation began to weigh heavily on them. Despite the odds, the two men found solace in each other's company. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and their reasons for being drawn to the iceberg. Michael admired Jensen's dedication to his research, while Jensen was struck by Michael's adventurous spirit and resourcefulness. Their shared struggle created a bond that transcended their initial wariness. One afternoon, as they sat atop a ridge overlooking the vast ocean, they noticed a distant shape on the horizon. At first it was just a speck, but it grew steadily larger. A rescue helicopter, alerted by the police in Haven's Edge, had spotted the beacon. Relief washed over them as the sound of its rotors filled the air. The helicopter maneuvered closer, battling the icy winds. As it hovered above, a rescue crew descended, bringing warmth and safety to the two exhausted survivors. As Michael and Dr. Jensen were lifted into the rescue helicopter, the overwhelming sense of relief was tempered by exhaustion. The warmth of the cabin and the kind faces of the crew felt almost surreal after their harrowing ordeal. Wrapped in blankets, they sat silently for a moment, watching the iceberg grow smaller as the helicopter ascended. Michael glanced at Jensen, whose weary face now carried a hint of peace. The scientist's incredible resilience and dedication had been a beacon of inspiration throughout their time together. Jensen, in turn, looked at Michael with quiet gratitude, recognizing the vital role his unexpected companion had played in their survival. As the helicopter sped toward the mainland, the two men reflected on the extraordinary events that had brought them together. The iceberg, a silent giant drifting through the ocean, had become a stage for a story of survival, discovery, and friendship. Michael realized that this experience had changed him. His quest for adventure had led him to confront challenges he never imagined, and in the process, he found a deeper sense of purpose. For Jensen, the ordeal reinforced his commitment to his work. Despite the setbacks and the isolation, his passion for understanding the natural world remained unshaken. He silently vowed to share the knowledge he had gained, ensuring that his time on the iceberg would have a lasting impact. As the coastline of Haven's Edge came into view, both men felt a mixture of relief and nostalgia. The quiet seaside village, once a backdrop for Michael's restless boredom, now seemed imbued with new meaning. The experiences they had shared on the iceberg had created a bond that would endure, a testament to the power of perseverance and human connection. When the helicopter touched down, a small crowd had gathered, their faces filled with awe and curiosity. Michael and Jensen stepped onto solid ground, their extraordinary story ready to be told. The iceberg, now a distant memory, had left an indelible mark on their lives, a reminder of the mysteries and challenges that lie beyond the familiar.